Hello and welcome to Channel 2S. I'm your host, Second Soundwave, and today we're looking at the high-grade 00 Gundam Dynames. This is a 2007 kit, and it was only around 1,000 yen, so I had my hopes set really low for this kit. I looked at it, I picked it up because it was cheap. I actually only got it for like 700 yen because I got it used, but regardless, I had very low hopes for this, pretty much no expectations for it to be any kind of decent kit. I just bought it because I like Lock-On Stratos, I like the look of the Dynames Gundam, I need something to replace that crappy HCM Pro that's been in my collection for the last 5 years. So, I picked this guy up, and wow, I am so confused with this kit because it literally runs down the checklist of things I don't like. It has lots of stickers, it has bad articulation, it has bad color separation, it has bizarrely unpainted parts, and yet I love it. I really do like this kit. It's just, I don't know, maybe just I really like the design and that counters off all the things I don't like about it, but I have to say, this was just a really good kit. And not just a good kit, it's just a fun kit to build. Like really with all these 00 kits, even the Reborn's Gundam, my absolute least favorite model I've ever built, I love the build on that, and I love the build on this. There's just something about those older 00 kits that is just so fun and relaxing to build. But before I start rambling for too long, we should go over the colors on this kit. So the primary color of the Dynames is, of course, this awesome looking military kind of dark forest green. And then there's some white for the armor, some gray for the joints, and a little bit of red and yellow for some of the other sections. And for the most part, this color separation looks really, really good. They got all the major stuff in, and they even did some nice little details, like if you look here inside the back thrusters, you'll notice that they painted the yellow parts in there, or rather, they're actually separate yellow components. I like that. I like that a lot. What I don't like a lot is that most of the gray, in fact all of the gray, on the torso that you see right here is actually a couple of wraparound stickers. Now, to be fair, they do a better job of sticking down than your usual wraparound sticker fare, and they're not that bad. But still, that entire torso section underneath the green, red, and yellow, that's just two white clamshells clapped together with a ton of stickers on them. Those little violet stripes down the side, stickers. That gray right here, sticker. This gray right here, sticker. The black underneath the gem in the chest, sticker. So many stickers. And they should look terrible, but I'm not really bothered by them. And then you move down to the knee and you've got even more stickers. You have these squares right here and you have those gray stripes running along the top. But I haven't had any issues with peeling and they look pretty darn good. And then as with any other 00 kit, you do get the black circles that go underneath the gems. You get the violet sections for the ribbon cables on the legs. And you get the forehead and eye cameras that literally every Gundam ever made have always included. And that's a ton of stickers, even for a high-grade model. But they all work. Nothing peels, nothing looks unusually tacky, they all work really well with the design. So now let's talk articulation, and yes, there are still more problems that I have with this kit. So, starting off with the head, things aren't too bad. They look up, they look down, they tilt around, it rotates all the way around, it does everything you'd want to do. And then it does something that I did not expect to see on this kit. So, you know how in the show, the Dynames has that thing where the visor kind of drops down over the eyes, or rather the V-fin kind of drops down to become a visor over the eyes, and you see this little targeting scope in the forehead. On the old HCM Pro figure, that was two alternate parts. And I knew that on the 1100 you'd kind of transform the head to do that, but I thought there's no way they'd be able to fit that onto a high grade. Well, you can actually take the V-fin, and you grab onto it, and you pull it down, and it totally does it, and I love that. I think that's just so cool. That was the first part of the kit I built, was the head right here, and that really set the tone for the rest of the build because that was just so fun. So then, as with the other 00 kits, you can move the spikes on the shoulders up and down. You can fold them all the way away if you like, or you can pull them up. I thought that was kind of an interesting design feature they had in the 00 kits, because they're really the only ones that kind of turned the Gundam chest design yellow sections into kind of collarbone spikes. I think that's kind of an interesting touch. So then you have this sort of interesting spin on the modern swing-out polycap design, where actually the entire chest kind of crunches inward, almost like what we saw on the Origin Zaku, except actually to a larger extent, because as you can see, there's a lot of forward range there. And then of course the shoulder's on a ball joint, and the ball joint's on a hinge so it can tip up a little bit, and the shoulder's on a kind of tight hinge that can bring it up to about here, so not too bad, and I'm just going to toss that off to the side because it does tend to get in the way. Then we have bicep swivel. We have an elbow hinge that goes 90 degrees, which is pretty pathetic, but not too bad. And then we have this cable back here, which is a rubbery cable, and I looked at this and I was thinking, oh man, this is just going to really hinder the elbow movement. It's going to be like the joint covers on the Full Armor Thunderbolt Gundam, where you just won't be able to get any kind of decent posing out of the arm. But no, this piece is actually completely detached from the joint. It just goes around here and kind of snakes in there, and it's actually on a sliding mechanism, which keeps it from ever getting in the way of the joint, and there's no problems from that whatsoever. The arms here, more specifically the wrists, I did have some problems with these, in the fact that these were made out of ABS plastic, and I have a suspicion, and this might have just been a manufacturing error on my kit, or maybe it's from a bad batch, I don't know, maybe they're all like this, but I think the ABS runner was slightly missized, because every joint that used ABS components was way too tight. And on every single one of them, especially the hands, I thought I was going to break the wrists when I first tried to take this guy's hands off. I had to actually take the joints and sand them down just a little bit to make them fit. And as you can see, I went a little overkill on the wrists, but I'd rather have them a little too loose than way too tight. So I'm willing to accept that trade-off. But anyway, ball joint wrists, and then the hinge here at the wrist lets you get a little more movement out of them. And then we go down to the torso, and you're getting a little bit of joint slop, but this is really just a straight swivel. And this is all you're getting out of it. Remember, this is early 2000s. You're going to get some bobbing movement, and you're going to get some swivel, and that's all you're getting. Again, these pieces back here kind of went overkill with the sanding on this one. This one's alright though, but they're on ball joints. You can push them close to the stem and kind of lock them in, or you can pull them out and get the full range of motion, but they swing out, they swing in. You can get some funky poses with them. I've always thought they were a dumb part of the design, so I really don't do much with them, but you can fold them out of the way if you like, so they can get a better look at the waist movement. Now, you'll notice this guy has no side skirts, so you might think, awesome, you know, he can do full splits and stuff. Well, not really. That's as far as his hips go. There's some basic little ball joints. Not a fan of that. I absolutely hate it when a kit does not have good, full, proper hip articulation. But it still actually hasn't dampened my enthusiasm for this kit. And you know, the swivel's still not that great because again, it's just a ball joint. But you do have that kind of ball joint in the middle of the stem thing that they used to do where you can actually take the whole hip section and kind of oscillate it all around and do what you like. Which is kind of a rudimentary version of that thing that the modern master grades do where they have like the swing down hip mechanism. And I think this works okay. I don't find myself needing it a lot, but it does help make up for the lack of swiveling that you have in the hips. Then of course you can go forward and you can separate the hip skirts like I did to get a little more movement out of them. You can go forward up to about here, and then you have a very stiff, because I actually didn't sand this down, but a very stiff 180 out of the knees that looks a little more awkward than it would on a modern kit, but not too bad, and it does get the job done, so I can't fault it too much. Then we have the ankles. We have this flap here that moves up and down. This back flap is completely fixed and won't be moving at all, but you can get the foot from here all the way up to here, and that is a lot of frontward foot movement, so you can get this guy into some really deep kind of forward lunges, which is awesome. And the outward side to side is actually, again, pretty darn good. There's no real side armor to the ankles, so you can get a lot of movement there. And of course it swivels. So overall, the articulation is, as you saw in the hips there, as you saw in the elbows, even in the shoulders, is really dated. In the waist, in the torso too, but you can still get some fun poses out of it. Now obviously you're not going to get that classic sniper pose where he's like kind of flat on the ground, tipping his head up. But if you kind of mess around with it a little, you can get something that's pretty close. So as you can see, what I've done right here is I've kind of cheated a little with the classic sniper pose, and I've actually arched his back upwards, but he does have enough articulation to bring his body upwards to the point where you can kind of use the bipod on the gun to prop him up and put him in something that isn't really a true sniper pose, but it's pretty darn close, and it works for display purposes. So now that you've seen the GN sniper rifle, I suppose it is time that I go over it in a bit more detail and give you a good proper look at his signature weapon. So as you can see, it's very long, it's very cool, it's just molded in one color, but it kind of was in the show anyway, so I'm not going to really fault them for that. The scope does have a sticker on it, looks very nice, very metallic. You got a handle, and then you got a peg that attaches into his forearm, and then you have another handle that can swing up and down and can be grabbed onto by the second hand, kinda sorta, not really. Then you have a bipod folded up under here, and you have a nice kind of tip on the barrel here. Looks very cool, looks like a real life sniper rifle, and I like that a lot. And then if you want to switch out the bipod to have him kind of in a crouching position like you saw earlier, you just pull it straight out, then you reach into your box of parts, and you grab this. Yeah, are you seeing a problem here? Apparently when he drops down his bipod, it magically changes colors. And they had room on the Gray Runner too. It's not that big a runner. They could have thrown this on there. So, I really have no idea why they made the bipod look like this, but I suppose you could paint it and it would end up looking pretty darn good. So to attach the rifle into his arm, it's very simple. What you do is you just take the handle, you push it down into his hand, and then there's kind of a little hole on the top of his arm. There's a peg right here. You push it in, and it really doesn't do jack squat. You tab it in, it tips back down. It really doesn't hold anything together at all. In fact, the tab's not even wide enough to touch the sides of the hole. It's kind of just there for aesthetics. But, you know, if you have his other arm kind of underneath it, if you pop this stupid thing off and replace it with the much nicer looking collapsed stock, and you kind of have his handle out, and you have him kind of grabbing it with the two hands. If you can kind of wrestle it in, it takes a bit of doing, but you can jam the secondary handle in like that, and I'm just going to kind of throw him into a kind of half-assed awkward sniping pose, and then maybe clean it up a little after the jump. But if you have him holding on to it with two hands, or you have another hand supporting under here, or you have him propping it up on the ground, you really don't have to worry about him being able to hold up his rifle. So here's a bit of a better action pose for everyone's favorite sniper, and as you can see, you can actually very easily get this guy into a one-kneed pose despite his limited articulation, which is something I was very happy to see, because sometimes even today you find figures that have trouble pulling that off. But as you can see, he does come with an open left hand, and if you put that underneath the gun, you can prop it up quite nicely and put him into some pretty cool poses. And when you're done putting your Dynames into awesome action poses, you can store the rifle right on the figure by taking this groove underneath right here, and you peg it into the thinner slot up here on the shoulder pad. If you look, you'll notice there's thick slots and thin slots. You drop it into the thin slot on either side, just like this, and his rifle is now stored on his shoulder for future use. And then the only other weapons included with this figure are stored right here on the back. So you grab onto this white section here, you pull it out, and yes, it is hard to get out, but at least it stays in, which is more than I can say for the HCM Pro. And just try to see if I can unscrew up this right here. Set this guy's feet back down secure. There we go. We have a beam saber hilt. And no blades. Seriously, you don't even get a toothpick for this guy. You just get the empty handles with a flat type blade connection point. So if you want to get some blades from your Age 1 normal, or your Gundam Astria, or any other kit that uses those type of blades, which can be a bit hard to find nowadays, and it's mostly the older kits that use them. I'd recommend, like I said, the Age 1 of the Astria. You could also look in the Red Frame Astray with Flight unit, as I believe that also uses these kind of blades. But either way, you're not really going to be doing anything with these out of the box. Now you might notice there's something rather conspicuously missing from his arsenal, and that is his handguns, because the high-grade Gundam 00 Dynames didn't actually come with his handguns. In fact, they didn't even release them until, a good 2 or 3 years later with the high-grade Astria Type F. Of course, if you're like me and you have the Astria Type F already, that's not an issue because you get the nice little pair of handguns right here. They even have their holsters. They open up. You can pull the handgun out. It looks pretty cool. It looks pretty awesome. It does fit in this guy's hand. However, the holster has kind of a rectangular peg on it, and if you look at the guy's leg here, it looks like there's a place for it to peg in. You might think it pegs in, but does it? No, not really. There's no way to get this in there. It's just not going to fit, which is really a shame because they were so close, but alas, you can't really get this properly on here unless you want to cement them on. So I guess that is always an option. But of course, if you just want your Gundam Dynames to wield the pistols, he does that with absolutely no problems whatsoever. And there is one more set of accessories that you get with the Gundam Dynames, and that is the shoulder shields. Now, I had one of them attached earlier. This is one of the small ones. You can just pop into the hole on the side just like this, and this is how he first appeared in the show. However, later on in the show, he did get some more armor, so you can just add this onto here. And, you know, he's looking pretty cool. He's looking pretty neat. These are on hinges. They can flap around like little birdie wings if you like. You can rotate them at the peg. But what you can really do, and this is what I like to do with them, because this is always how I've associated the Dynames' armor, but you can take the peg, and you take the peg, and let me see if I can get this to focus right, but you rotate it down, and you'll notice there's a little notch there. And you take this, and you want to switch the sides they're on, and then you attach them to the big groove that's in the shoulder pad here. And you just drop them in, and lock them down. And already, you can look at this guy and tell that something cool is about to happen. You can also tell that I got these backwards, so I'm going to just switch these just like this. You basically want the outsides of the shields to be flush with the shoulder connectors, because you're going to be taking these big shoulder pieces and popping them on right here. And these do actually have some joints in them. You can rotate them out like this. You can rotate them in like this, and do just generally fun stuff with them. Basically, the reason all these joints are here is that once you have both of these on, like this, and like this, and they do pop on very easily, which is something I like, you can see you have this awesome kind of cloak for him, and you can actually take these sections here, pull them out just a little bit, and I didn't even realize these locked in until like a day before I did this review, but they do lock in place, and sometimes you have to take the shoulder armor off to get to them because they're a little tight, but that is good because it keeps things from, you know, flopping around too much while you have this guy just standing around. But you can actually take these, and you go, whoop, and they rotate in, and now you have a kind of Death Scythe Hell style cloak for the Dynames, and it looks really awesome. And like I showed you before, you fold this out, and what that basically allows you to do is put a weapon in his hands and have him still shooting while he's wearing his cloak. So if you want to do that, you can totally do that, and it looks awesome. And what probably came as the biggest surprise to me is that you actually have enough space between the armor and the torso of the kit to slide in the gun right where it was clipped in before, and it fits underneath his cloak very nicely and makes a nice, compact little Dynames package. And there's really not much more I can say about the Gundam Dynames. Obviously, he does have some seam lines here and there. He's an older kit, but they're really not that bad, and I didn't think there was too much of an issue with them. But if you are a more experienced modeler or a more critical modeler, you might want to go in there with some plastic cement and see what you can fix up. However, just as a snap-together kit, even with the stickers, even with the poor articulation, I still do kind of recommend this kit, or at the very least, I had fun with it. Obviously, this kit isn't for everyone, and you might not have liked this kit from looking at it, but I loved this kit. This was a fun build. It's just fun to mess around with once it's all together. You look at it, it's got bad articulation. Yes, it does have bad articulation, and despite all that, you can still get some really cool sniper poses out of this guy. And for that, I give this kit a solid thumbs up. Anyway, this has been Second Soundwave from Channel 2S. If you liked this video, be sure to leave a like. If you're new here, subscribe. I do Gundam news, I do Gundam reviews, I do all sorts of Gundam related stuff. If you built this kit before, if you feel like saying something about it, if you're planning on building it, leave a comment down in the comments. I always like hearing from you guys. And until then, I'm Second Soundwave, and I'll see you next time.